Do not attack humanity, the council refused to listen. The hall went silent. The moment I said the word ruin, 900 worlds sat above me in rings of pale light, and not one of them moved. I stood on the small black platform at the center of the Concordat chamber, an old Zelthan scholar with gray skin and tired hands, and I had just told the most powerful gathering in the known galaxy that they were about to make the worst decision in their long history. My voice shook, but I did not stop. I had spent 10 years learning why I should be afraid, and now I had 10 minutes to make them afraid with me. You are about to attack a young species called humanity. I said, I am asking you with everything. I have to put your weapons down and walk away. A low ripple of amusement passed through the rings above me. I heard it, the way you hear a wave before it reaches your feet. They thought I was joking. They thought the old teacher had spent too long among primitives and had come home soft in the head. The leader of the war faction, a broad, dry officer named Korth, rose from his seat and looked down at me with something close to pity. Scholar Voltaren, you have studied these humans. Tell the chamber their numbers. Tell us how long they live. Tell us the strength of their fleet. I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to read the charts, so I did. They number a few billion, I said. They live on average 80 years. Their ships are slow. Their shields are thin. By every measurement this council has ever used, they are weak. Korth spread his hands as if I had just argued his case for him. Then we have nothing to fear. That is exactly why you should be terrified. I said. The amusement died a little. Good, I needed it dead. I told them what the charts could not measure. I told them that humans were the only species I had ever met who grew stronger when you hurt them. I told them that every other species in this galaxy had evolved toward calm, toward balance, toward avoiding pain. Humanity had evolved the other way. They had grown up on a world that tried to end them every single season with cold and fire and hunger and storms, and instead of learning to bend, they had learned to push back. They had learned to dig in. They had learned a thing none of us had a word for, a thing their language called spite, and their spite did not care about survival. Human, I told the chamber, will lose everything they own to make sure their enemy loses more. You measure their fleet, I said. You do not measure their patience. You do not measure what they do when you take something they love. And I am telling you, I have seen it with my own eyes, and it does not stop. It does not bargain. It does not surrender the way you expect. It simply comes for you slowly and forever until the debt is paid. For one breath the chamber was quiet in a different way, not amused, listening. Then Kor laughed, and the moment broke like thin ice. You describe wild animals, he said. We have tamed wilder. There is a human colony sitting on a trade lane that belongs to us. It is in the way. We will remove it. The way you remove a stone from a road. A small action, a lesson, nothing more. There is no such thing as a small action against these people. I said, if you remove one stone from their road, they will spend 100 years removing your entire mountain. A young voice spoke from the lower rings. I have read the scholars' reports. Heads turned. It was an aide named Iran 9, a slender clerk who managed records and almost never spoke. She stood now with her hands clasped tight to stop them trembling. The reports are strange, she admitted, but they are careful. The scholar does not exaggerate. If he is afraid, I think we should ask why. Core did not even look at her. Children should record the vote, not shape it, he said, and she sat down. With her face turned to the floor, I tried one last time. I stepped to the very edge of the platform and looked up into all those rings of cold light, and I said the only true thing I had left. You think their silence is weakness, I told them. You think because they have not threatened you, they cannot hurt you, but their silence is not weakness. It is the quiet of a people who have not yet been given a reason. Do not give them one. I am begging you, do not be the reason. The vote came moments later. It was clean and fast and merciless, the way easy decisions always are. The light above the platform shifted to show the count. 847 worlds voted to authorize the strike. 53 voted against. Erie 9 was one of the 53, so was I. Core stood and accepted the result with a small bow, already turning to his officers, already moving on to the practical work of war. To him it was settled. To him it was a line on a schedule. I walked out of that chamber alone. My legs carried me through the great curved halls and out under the artificial sky of the council seat, and I stopped at a railing that looked over the whole shining city, and I gripped it until my knuckles ached. Erie 9 found me there. She did not say anything for a long time. She just stood beside me, two small failures sharing one large silence. They will not listen, she finally said. No, I answered. They never do until the thing they ignored is standing in the room with them. Is it really so bad, she asked. One colony. They are not even attacking the human home world. Surely a single colony is a small thing even to them. I shook my head slowly. I was so tired. You do not understand them yet, I said. There is no such thing as a small wound to a human. They do not feel pain the way we do. They store it, they share it, they pass it from one to another like a flame, and they keep it burning long after the rest of us would have let it die. Cora thinks he is striking a single colony. He is striking a match in a room full of dry wood, and he does not even know the room is there. She was quiet again. Then she asked the question that would shape the rest of both our lives. What do we do? I looked out at the lights of the safe, comfortable, confident city below me. The city that had just decided to harm people it did not understand, and I made a decision of my own. We watch, I said. We watch all of it, and we write it down. And we make sure that when this is over, someone somewhere finally learns the lesson we paid so much to teach. Bring me a recorder, Erie 9. Bring me a clean one. I am going to start at the beginning, and I am going to tell the whole truth, even the parts that will make us ashamed. She brought me the recorder that night. I held it in my old gray hands for a long while before I spoke into it. I thought about my 10 years among them. I thought about the small house I had lived in on a windy coast on their world, and the neighbors who had fed me even though I frightened their children at first. I thought about how they argued and forgave and built and broke and built again. I thought about how the more I learned, the less I slept. Then I pressed the button and I began to speak, and the first thing I said was the warning that no one in the chamber had wanted to hear. Do not attack humanity, I said into the small, cold device. The council refused to listen, so let me explain to whoever finds this exactly what it cost us all. Far above the city in a quiet shipyard, the first vessels of Core's fleet were already lighting their engines, pointing their slow certain way toward a small human colony at the edge of a trade lane carrying a lesson they believed. They were about to teach, they were wrong about who the student would be. I want to start with the small things, because the small things are the truth. When I first arrived on the human world, I expected to find a species like the dozens of others I had studied across my long career. I expected metrics. I expected a clean shape I could describe in a report and file away. Instead, I found a contradiction that took me 10 years to even begin to understand, and I am not sure I ever fully did. My house, as I said, was on a coast. The sea there was gray and angry most of the year, and the wind came off the water hard enough to lean against. My nearest neighbor was a woman named Grace Bennett. She lived alone, ran a small boat, and pulled food from the cold sea with her own hands. She was not a soldier. She was not a leader. She was, by every chart I owned, the most ordinary human alive, and she taught me more than any of their scientists. I remember the first storm. It came in fast and black, and I sat in my house watching the windows shake, certain that the little boats in the harbor would be lost. The next morning, I walked down to see the damage, and there was Grace, soaked to the bone. Already at work, her boat had been thrown against the rocks in the night. The hull was cracked. By my measure, it was finished. By her measure, it was a problem to be solved before lunch. You will buy another, I said, trying to be kind. She looked at me like I had said something foolish. No, she said, I will fix this one. It is mine. The sea does not get to decide what is mine. That sentence stayed with me for 10 years. The sea does not get to decide what is mine. I learned slowly that this was not just one stubborn woman. This was the whole species. They lived on a world that constantly tried to take things from them, and somewhere far back in their history, they had simply decided to refuse. They could not stop the storms. They could not stop the cold, or the fire, or the long dark winters. But they could refuse to accept the result. They could rebuild. They could dig in. They could outlast. I tried to put this in my reports to the council, and I failed every time. How do you write a metric for refusal? How do you measure a species' unwillingness to lose? There is no number for it. There is no chart, and the council only believes in numbers. So the most important truth about humanity was the one truth I could never make them see. I watched other things in those years, things that frightened me more than any weapon. I watched a human father pull his child from beneath a fallen wall, and in the moment of fear, his body did something no Zelthon body could do. It poured out a hidden strength far beyond anything his muscles should have been able to manage, and he lifted a weight that should have crushed him. When the child was safe, he collapsed, shaking, and could barely stand for an hour. I asked their doctors about it, and they shrugged and called it a normal emergency reaction, a thing that lives quiet inside every human and wakes only when someone they love is in danger. We do not have that. We evolved it away long ago because it is dangerous and wasteful, and it burns the body that uses it. We chose safety. They never did. I watched them play at hardship for entertainment. They told each other frightening stories on purpose. They built games where they practiced surviving disasters that had not happened. They sat in warm, safe rooms and rehearsed the end of the world for fun again and again, as if they were keeping a muscle ready. No other species I have ever studied does this. We avoid The thought of catastrophe, they train for it while they are comfortable so that when it comes they have already met it 1,000 times in their minds, and I watched them grieve, and this was the thing that took the sleep from me for good. When a human loses someone they love, they do not simply mourn and move on, they gather, they hold the loss together in groups, and they pass it between them, and somehow out of that shared pain they built monuments out of grief, they built laws out of grief, and more than once in their long history they had built terrible and powerful things out of grief, because a human who has lost something will work without rest to make sure the loss meant something, to make sure it is never repeated, to make the universe itself afraid to do it again. I sat in my little coastal house on the night before I left their world to return to the council, and Grace Bennett came to say goodbye. She brought me a small carved stone worn smooth, the kind the sea throws up after a storm. For luck, she said, wherever you are going. I held it, and I felt my hearts grow cold, because I knew where I was going, and I knew what waited therein. The schedules and the charts. I almost told her, I almost said, my people are going to make a terrible mistake, and your people are going to make them pay for it in a way the galaxy has never seen. But I said nothing. I was a coward that night. I only thanked her and took the stone. I still have it. I am holding it now as I speak into this recorder all these years later. It is the only thing I have left from a quiet world and a quiet woman, both of which are gone. So when I stood before the Concordat of 900 worlds and begged them not to attack humanity, I was not guessing. I was not exaggerating. I was the only person in that entire chamber who had seen with my own eyes exactly what these people were, a species shaped entirely by adversity, a species that grew stronger the more you hurt it, species that did not know how to surrender, because their whole history was the story of refusing to. The council looked at humanity's thin shields and slow ships and saw a weak and harmless thing. I looked at the same people and saw the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, simply waiting, patient and quiet, for someone foolish enough to give them a reason. Korath gave them one. He sent a fleet to a small colony at the edge of a trade lane, certain it would fold within hours, certain it was nothing more than removing a stone from a road. But humanity does not have small colonies. It only has homes, and the sea, as Grace once told me, does not get to decide what is theirs. Neither, it turned out, did the council. I knew the moment I heard the fleet had launched that the quiet was over. The match had been struck, and somewhere in a small colony I had never seen, ordinary humans with ordinary names were about to teach 900 worlds the lesson I had failed to teach them with words. I started recording everything. I would not look away. I owed them that much. I owed everyone that much. This is what happened next. The colony was called Halden's Reach, and the council expected it to surrender before the morning meal. I had access to the fleet reports through Erie 9, who still worked in the records office, and who, like me, had decided she would rather know the truth than sleep well. Each night she sent me what came in, and each night I sat in the dark and read it, and the shape of the disaster grew clearer. Halden's Reach was not a military world. It had perhaps 40,000 people. It had farms and workshops and a single old defense station that the council's own analysts described as outdated. The plan was simple and Korath was proud of its simplicity. His ships would arrive, take control of the space above the colony, and demand surrender according to council doctrine. Every species that had ever been shown such overwhelming force had given in within hours. Resistance against orbital control was, in their words, statistically irrational. No sensible people would fight a battle they could not win. The humans of Halden's Reach were about to teach the galaxy that sensible was not the same as harmless. When the fleet arrived, the colony did exactly what the doctrine predicted. At first, they sent a surrender signal. The fleet's officers relaxed. Corinth, watching from his command ship, recorded a satisfied note that I later read with a cold feeling in my chest. The humans are reasonable. After all, he wrote, the scholar overstated everything, but the surrender was not a surrender, it was a clock. While the false signal played, looping the same calm message of submission over and over, the people of Halden's Reach were doing two things at once. They were quietly moving their leaders, their records, and their children out through the far side of the colony into the hills and the deep mines where the fleet sensors could not easily reach, and they were preparing the colony itself. The fleet sent down a landing force, confident and unhurried, to formally take control of the settlement. The Trent said this was the moment the conquered people would gather in the central square, frightened and obedient to be counted. The humans had read the same doctrine in a sense. They understood exactly what the enemy expected, so they gave the enemy exactly what it expected right up until the moment they did not. The landing force entered an empty town. The streets were quiet, the houses were open, there was no one in the square. And then, before the officers could understand what they were seeing, the colony's own power systems, which the people had carefully arranged, released all their stored energy at once. The settlement, the homes, the workshops, the whole place the humans had built with their own hands was undone in a single great release of light, and the landing force was undone with it. I want to be careful here because I am not telling this story to celebrate anyone's harm. I am telling it so you understand. The humans destroyed their own home. They took everything they had built and they unmade it on purpose rather than hand it to an enemy, and they made certain the enemy paid the highest possible price for setting foot in it. When the report of this reached the fleet, the officers did not understand it. They kept searching for the rest of the surrender. They kept waiting for the humans to behave the way every conquered species had behaved before. They sent message after message demanding that the colonists present themselves, and from the hills and the mines the humans sent back nothing at all. Silence, the same silence I had warned the council about. The silence of a people who had not yet decided to speak. Kor grew angry. An empty victory is no victory, and he had been promised an easy one. He ordered his ships to search the hills to find the hidden colonists, to make an example of them. The fleet spent days hunting through rough country for 40,000 people who knew every stone of it and who had spent their whole lives learning to outlast things stronger than themselves. They found almost no one. What they found instead were small, clever traps left behind in narrow places, built from mining tools and farm chemicals and pure human ingenuity. Nothing grand, nothing that would trouble the fleet as a whole, but enough again and again to remind the soldiers that they were not the hunters. Here, the colonists did not fight in the open, they did not gather to be counted. They simply made the cost of every step. A little higher and then a little higher, and they refused with the same stubbornness Grace Bennet had shown her. Broken boat to accept that they had lost. I read these reports each night, and I felt two things at once. I felt sorrow, deep sorrow for everyone caught in this on both sides, and I felt a terrible cold certainty because this was only the beginning, and I was the only one who knew it. Erie 9 came to my quarters one evening, pale and shaken. "It is going wrong," she said. "Kith promised a clean action. Instead, his fleet is stuck above a ruined colony, chasing people through the hills, and the council is starting to ask questions." "It is not going wrong," I told her gently. "It is going exactly as I said it would. This is what attacking humanity looks like. It is slow, it is patient, it does not give you the clean ending you want. It just keeps adding to the bill." "What will Corinth do?" I already knew. I had known since the vote. "He cannot stop now," I said. "He cannot return to the council and say a colony of farmers humiliated his fleet. His pride will not allow it, so he will do the worst possible thing. He will make it bigger. He will ask the council for a real fleet, and he will turn a small action into a true war, and in doing so he will make it personal for every human alive, not just the people of one colony." She stared at me. "Surely the council will see the danger. Surely they will pull back." "They will not," I said. "They have already spent 847 votes on this. They have spent their pride. People will protect their pride long after they have stopped protecting their sense." I rubbed my tired eyes. "Watch, he will get his fleet, and humanity will hear for the first time that this was not an accident at the edge of a trade lane. They will hear that the great Council of 900 Worlds has decided they are a problem to be removed. And then everything changes." I was right. Within days, Kor stood before the chamber again. And this time he did not speak of small actions. He spoke of a defiant and dangerous species that had destroyed its own colony rather than accept the lawful order of the council. He spoke of traps and tricks and the loss of his landing force. He did not mention that he had started it. He asked for a full fleet, and the council, having already committed itself, having already spent its pride, gave it to him. That night, the first human transmission reached council space. It was not a plea, it was not a demand. Erie 9 brought it to me with shaking hands, and we listened to it together in the dark. A human voice, calm and even, read out a list of names, the names of the people of Halden's Reach, the lost and the living. Everyone. It took a long time. The voice did not hurry, and when the names were finished, there was a pause, and then the voice said a single sentence in the trade tongue so that no one in the council could pretend not to understand. "We are coming to return exactly what you sent us." Then the transmission ended. 9 turned to me frightened. "What does that mean? Return what? They have no fleet that can reach us. They are weak. You said yourself, by every measure they are weak." I held my small carved stone, the one Grace had given me, and I looked at it for a long time before I answered. "By every measure, we know how to take." "Yes," I said quietly, "but we have just taught them that our measures do not apply to them. We have just shown them that the rules they thought protected the small from the large are nothing but words, and we have given a grieving Species a list of dead to carry. I closed my hand around the stone. They are not weak, Eerie 9, they were. Simply waiting, and we have just spent our entire fleet and all our pride to wake them up, whatever happens now. Remember this moment. This is the moment. We could still have stopped and chose not to. That was the night I stopped being a scholar studying a curious species from a safe distance. That was the night I became a witness to something far larger and far darker, and I knew with a certainty that sat in my chest like a stone that I would spend the rest of my life recording every step of the long road we had just set ourselves upon, the road that led in the end to the fall of everything we thought we were. The war that followed was nothing like the war Korth had imagined. He had planned for a single clean campaign. He had a great fleet now, the finest ships of 900 worlds, crewed by experienced officers armed with technology that had taken our civilizations thousands of years to perfect. By every chart the Council still believed in, the humans should have been finished within a single season. Their drives were slower, their shields were thinner, they had no fleet that could stand against ours in open space, and yet, season after season, they did not lose. I have spent years trying to explain why, and I have settled on 3 reasons. Eerie 9 and I used to discuss them late into the night in the small office where she still kept the records, both of us long since marked as troublemakers, both of us tolerated only because we knew the humans better than anyone else, and the Council had finally, far too late, begun to want that knowledge. The first reason was speed, not the speed of their ships, which was poor, but the speed of their minds. When the humans captured a piece of our technology, they did not study it the way we would have carefully over generations, respecting the work of those who came before. They tore it open, they argued about it, they tried foolish things that should not have worked, and learned from the ones that did, and within months they were building copies, and then within months after that they were building improvements we had never thought of. Single human generation of weapons and ships and tools moved further than ours had moved in 1,000 years. They were behind us when the war began. They were beside us within 2 years, and the gap kept closing while we watched, helpless to make our own people work any faster than they ever had. The second reason was the way they spent themselves. This is the part that the Council could never understand, and the part that in the end broke them. Our fleets fought to be preserved. Every officer's first duty was to bring his ship and his crew home. This is sensible. This is how reasonable people fight, but the humans did not fight to preserve. They fought to make their losses mean something. They would trade 10 of their slow, weak ships to corner one of our great ones, and they did not weep over the trade. They celebrated it. They considered it a bargain. When a human commander lost a ship, she did not retreat to save the others. She found a way to make the loss cost us more than it cost her, and then she did it again and again until our officers began to fear the very idea of meeting them, because there was no victory you could win against a people who counted their own destruction as a price worth paying. The third reason was the hardest for us to accept, because it struck at the heart of how the Council itself was built. We expected to find a leader. We always did. Every species we had ever brought under the Council's order had a head we could remove, a center we could capture, a chain of Command we could break. When the chain broke, the species surrendered. That was the doctrine. That was always how it ended. Humanity had no single head to remove. When the war turned serious, humanity did not gather under one banner. It scattered into 1,000 smaller groups, each able to act on its own, each fighting in its own way, loosely connected but never dependent on any single center. We could capture human leader and gain nothing, because 10 more would simply continue without pause, and none of them had the authority to surrender on behalf of the rest, even if they had wanted to, which they did not. There was no one to make peace with. There was no head to cut from the body. There was only a great and patient swarm of free and stubborn people, all carrying the same list of names, all moving toward us, and no message we sent and no leader we captured could make them stop. Cord a decade. In those years, I saw recordings of him. The proud officer who had bowed and moved on to his schedule was gone, and in his place was a tired old soldier who flinched at every report, who had finally understood far too late that he had not started a campaign but a debt, and the humans were collecting it with a patience that made his own people lose heart. It was in the 3rd year of the war, that eerie 9, and I made our decision. We have to try, she said one night before there is nothing left to save. We know them. If anyone can speak to them, it is us. Let us reach a human commander. Let us at least try to find a way to peace. I was afraid. I had seen the list of names. I knew what we had done, but she was right, and so we tried. It took months to arrange, working in secret, using old contacts and quiet channels, risking everything. And at last, on a small neutral station, far from the fighting, I found myself sitting across a table from a human commander, the first human I had spoken to face since I left their world. Her name was Grace. For one terrible moment, my wild hearts nearly stopped, because the name was the same as my neighbor's, and I thought, foolishly, impossibly, that it was her. It was not. This Grace was younger, harder, with tired eyes that had seen too much, and a quiet steadiness that I recognized at once, because it was the same steadiness the other Grace had shown her broken boat in the harbor all those years ago. The sea does not get to decide what is mine. You are the scholar, she said. It was not a question. The one who lived among us, the one who tried to stop them. I am. I said. How do you know that? We know, she said simply. We made it our business to know everything about the people who decided to come and remove us. You stood up in their great hall and told them not to do this. You told them we were dangerous. You told them to walk away. She studied me with those tired eyes. You were right, and they did not listen. And so here we are. I have come to ask for peace, I said. The words felt small and useless even as I spoke them. Before more is lost, before this becomes something that cannot be undone. I knew a woman named Grace once on your world. She taught me what your people are. I do not want to see you destroyed, and I do not want to see my own people destroyed either. There is still time. Please tell me what it would take to end this. She was quiet for a long moment. She was not cruel. That was the thing I will never forget. She was not a monster. She looked at me with something that was almost kindness and almost sorrow, and that made what she said far worse than any threat could have been. I believe that you tried, she said softly. I believe you are a good man, scholar in your way, and I am sorry because none of it matters now. she leaned forward. You do not get to warn the fire and then ask it to forgive the people who lit it. We were not a threat to anyone. We were farmers on a road. We sent your council a signal of surrender, and they sent soldiers into our home anyway. We carried our dead into the hills, and we read their names to the stars, and your council called us defiant for grieving. We are not coming to conquer you. We never wanted what you have. We are coming to make absolutely certain that no one ever again looks at a small and quiet people and decides they are a stone to be removed from a road. She sat back. There is no peace that buys that. There is only the lesson, and we are going to finish teaching it. I have replayed that conversation in my mind 10,000 times. I have searched it for the word I could have said to change her answer. There is no such word. I knew it then, and I know it now. We were past the time when words could fix this. We had been past it since the vote, since 847. Worlds had decided that a people they did not understand were too small to matter. I returned to the council with empty hands and a heavy heart, and I told them the truth, that there was no leader to bargain with, no center to capture, no surrender that humanity would accept, and that the only thing left to do was to stop completely and pray that it was enough. By then even Cor agreed. By then the worlds that had voted so confidently for the strike were lining up to abstain from the war, to wash their hands of it, to pretend they had never raised their voices for it at all. The great unity of the council was cracking world by world as the cost grew, and the humans did not stop, and the comfortable certainty that had ruled us for so long curdled into fear. The draw home world, Cor's own world, the world that had first proposed removing a stone from a road, was the first of the great worlds to fall out of the war entirely, its leaders begging the humans for terms, receiving only silence in return. And then in the 4th year, the human fleet, slow and stubborn and impossibly patient, set its course toward the one place we had believed was beyond all reach. It set its course for the council seat itself, for the great shining city of 900 worlds, for the chamber where I had stood and begged and been laughed at and been ignored. Eerie found me at the same railing where we had stood on the night of the vote 4 long years before. The city below was no longer confident. The lights flickered with fear now. People who had never imagined danger reaching them were finally truly afraid. They are coming here, she whispered. Yes, I said, to destroy us, to do to us what we did to them. I looked out at the city, and I thought of Grace, the commander, and the neighbor both, and the carved stone in my pocket, and the long terrible road we had chosen. No, I said slowly, not to destroy us. They told me as much. They are coming to make sure we never do this again to anyone. That is a different thing. That is mercy of a kind, though it will not feel like it. I gripped the railing. The question that remains is whether they have any mercy left to spend. We have spent 4 years teaching them that we have none. I do not know what we have taught them about themselves. That was the last quiet night the council seat ever had. I spent it speaking into my recorder, as I had spent so many nights putting down the truth while there was still someone left to put it down for. The next morning the human fleet arrived, and the galaxy I had known my entire life came to its end, not in fire and fury, as the council had always feared, but in a silence far more terrible. The patient, final silence of a people who had finished what they came to do. They did not destroy us. I want that to be the first thing you understand, whoever you are listening to this long after we are all gone, when the human fleet finally arrived above the council seat after 4 years and a list of names and a war that had broken 900 worlds. They had every reason and every means to end us completely. We had braced for it. The whole city had braced for it. We believed in our fear that we had earned it, and then at the very last moment, with their slow, stubborn ships filling our sky in their long collected debt, finally come, they stopped. I was in the chamber when the message came. The great rings of light were nearly empty. Now, so many worlds had fled or abandoned the council that only a frightened handful remained. Korath, among them an old broken soldier who had outlived his certainty. Eerie stood beside me. We had decided, the two of us, that whatever happened we would meet it together in the place where it had all begun. A single human voice spoke into the chamber. I knew it at once. It was Grace, the commander. Council of 900 worlds, she said, we are here. You sent soldiers to remove us from a road. We have come a very long way to answer. By every right, you understand, we could unmake you now the way you tried to unmake us, and not one of us would lose a moment of sleep over it. She paused, and the whole chamber held its breath. We are not going to. Sound went through the few remaining worlds, a sound of pure disbelief. We did not fight this war to become you. Grace continued. We did not carry our dead through the hills and across 4 years of darkness so that we could learn to look at a people and decide they are too small to matter. That was your sickness. We will not catch it. Her voice hardened. But understand this. The Council of 900 worlds is finished. There will be no more votes about which quiet people are in the way. There will be no more lessons taught to farmers on roads. You believed yourselves the keepers of order. You were only the keepers of your own comfort, and you were willing to unmake anyone who disturbed it. That ends today. I listened, and I felt tears on my old gray face, and I did not know if they were grief or relief, because they were both. Here is what will be. Gray said, we will not rule you. We do not want your worlds or your seats or your shining city. We will go home to the world we rebuilt while you tried to remove us to the colonies we will raise again from the ashes you made of them. But we will be watching from this day. Humanity is the line that no one crosses. If any power ever again looks at a smaller people and decides to remove them, we will already be on our way, not to conquer, to answer. You wanted a keeper of the peace. You have one now. You simply do not get to choose the terms anymore. And then the human fleet, having said everything it came to say, having unmade the council not with fire but with words, turned in our sky and began the long journey home. That was how it ended. Not with the destruction we feared, but with something far stranger, and in its way far heavier. The most feared species in the galaxy chose at the height of its power, with the throats of its enemies beneath its hand, to walk away, and in walking away it became something none of us had a word for. Not a ruler, not a conqueror, a watcher, a presence. The story that every other species would now tell its children, the quiet warning passed from one generation to the next. Be careful, be kind to the small, be just to the quiet, because humanity is watching, and humanity remembers, and humanity does not forget a name. The council never met again. There was nothing left to meet about. The great chamber where 847 worlds had voted so confidently to remove a stone from a road stood empty within the year, its rings of light dark, its halls silent. Korath did not live long after. I will not say more about his end than that it was quiet, and that I believe at the very last he finally understood the thing I had tried to tell him in that chamber so many years before. I hold no anger toward him now. He was not an evil creature, he was something more dangerous than evil. He was certain he looked at a people he did not understand, and he was certain they did not matter, and his certainty cost the galaxy everything it thought it was. If there is a single lesson in all of this, perhaps that is it: beware your own certainty. It is the most expensive thing you will ever own. As for me, the humans did one last thing before they left, a thing I did not expect and have never fully deserved. They came for me. A small human ship broke from the departing fleet and came to the council seat, and a young officer stepped out and asked for the scholar who had once lived among them, the one who had stood in the great hall and tried to stop the war before it began. When I came forward, old and gray and certain I was being taken to answer for my people's choices, the officer instead bowed to me the way one bows to an elder. Commander Grace sends her respect, the young human said. She says you were the only one who saw us clearly, and the only one who tried. She says humanity does not forget that either. He held out his hand. We are building something new, a way for species to speak to one another that does not run through a chamber of 900 worlds, deciding who is too small to matter. We need someone who knows both sides, someone the humans trust, and someone the rest can understand. She asked me to ask if you would be the first to carry that role. I think I wept again. I'm not ashamed of it. I had spent 10 years learning to love a species I could not protect, and 4 years watching the disaster I had foreseen unfold exactly as I feared, certain to my bones that I had failed at the only task that ever mattered, and here at the end of everything, the people I had failed to save were offering me a hand. I took it. I have spent the years since as the first voice between the worlds and the human watch. It is a strange and lonely honor. The humans respect me, but I am not one of them. My own people remember me as the scholar whose warnings came true, and they cannot look at me without remembering what they chose, and so they keep their distance. I belong fully to neither side. I am the bridge, and a bridge is walked upon by everyone, and at home with no one, but it is good work, and it is honest work, and it is the work of making sure that what happened never happens again. I would not trade it. I went back once to the human world, to the windy coast where I had lived. The colony at Halden's Reach was rebuilt by then, raised again from the ashes the way Grace Bennett raised her boat from the rocks, because the sea does not get to decide what is theirs, and neither in the end did the council. I stood on that gray shore, and I held the small carved stone my old neighbor had given me, worn smooth by a sea on a world I had grown to love, and I thought about everything it had cost to learn what I had tried to teach in 10 minutes, in a great hall full of people who would not listen. This is why I have recorded all of this, not for my people who already know and who must live with it, not for the humans who carry their own memory better than any recording could. I have recorded it for you, whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever and whenever you find this, because somewhere out there in the long future, you will meet a young species. It will be fragile. It will be short-lived. It will be fierce in a way that frightens you, and you will be tempted, as we were tempted, to look at its thin ships and its small numbers and its quiet ways, and decide that it does not matter, that it is a stone in your road, that it can be removed. When that day comes, I beg you, do the one thing we failed to do. Do not measure its weapons, measure its grief, measure how it loves and how it loses, and what it builds out of the losing. Ask yourself not whether it can hurt you today, but whether it will ever stop once you have given it a reason. And whatever the charts say, whatever your certainty tells you, whatever the vote count, leave that quiet people in peace. I told the Council of 900 Worlds that once I stood in their great hall, and I said it as plainly as I could. Do not attack humanity. They refuse to listen. I do not have the luxury of refusing to remember, and now, having heard all of this, neither do you. The stone is warm in my hand. The recorder is nearly full. There is nothing left to say except the thing I have been trying to say from the very first word. Be careful with the small and the quiet ones. They are not weak, they are only waiting. We learned that the hardest way there is. Do not make us the reason you learn it.